Well, good morning. I am House Minority Leader Lisa Damath, and today's forecast shows that we are still on the verge of a deficit. I know you heard differently, but I want to walk you through that process. That deficit is due to the reckless, irresponsible, and unaffordable spending spree last year. The state is still spending $1.5 billion more than it is taking in. When you look at your family budgets, if you are spending more than you are actually taking in, that results in a future deficit. So despite a continually growing economy, there still isn't enough tax revenue to meet the DFL's spending demands. This goes to show that we have a spending problem in Minnesota, not a revenue problem. Republicans have been warning since last session that this rampant spending will only hurt Minnesotans, and this forecast today does prove that. Minnesotans, especially small businesses, remained overtaxed and overburdened by the state. Last session, Democrats spent the entire $17.5 billion surplus and raised another $10 billion in taxes and fees on Minnesotans to fuel a massive 40% growth in government. It's time to cut spending and budget responsibly instead of trying to maintain the reckless spending from last session. Just in the last year, Democrats have sent $1.1 billion to unaccountable nonprofits and increased commissioner pay by massive amounts. Democrats are spending and are sending taxpayer dollars to their friends and political allies instead of keeping their promises to Minnesotans. As we cut wasteful spending, Democrats also need to keep their promises, including a full repeal of the tax on Social Security and sending the surplus back to Minnesotans. Family budgets and small businesses need meaningful tax relief now, and that's what Republicans are asking for.
Thank you, Leader Damath, and thank you for coming out this morning. It's great to see you here. I'd like to thank the MMB team too as well for the work that they put in this forecast. They really had to work overtime to make this look as good as possible. There's really no leaping over it. The tax and spend policies that Democrats have proposed over the years and put into law are causing our state to go into this boom and bust cycles. Democrats continue to entertain more spending this session, while state officials, as we heard today, are urging caution on our state spending. Meanwhile, Minnesotans are still struggling with $10 billion of new tax increases after last session, $10 billion to our families. Senate Republicans are working hard to repair that damage done by Democrats, and we're continuing that work this session. We'll hold the line on new spending and support modest, common sense bonding bill, given that it doesn't max out the state's credit card, and also the substantive work within that is focused on Minnesotans. We saw the governor get a little defensive today. We saw some legislative leaders get defensive and throw out a lot of red herrings and doublespeak on what actually our priorities are. But the reality is this is the forecast, looking forward, what we need to do in policy today to ensure that Minnesotans are taken care of in the future. And that's what we are committed to and working hard on every single day. With that, we're open to questions.
$830 million bonding bill, something you guys can get behind?
It's something that we will be taking a look at, given the other constraints that we have, the caution that MMB has thrown out as well. I mean, this is a forecast. There's no certainties within that. As we see, it continually changes. So we have to monitor that, but we want to make sure that we're doing the right things for Minnesota. Roads, bridges, water, infrastructure, those types of things. So we'll be taking a look at that.
Increased capacity that went up from 830 to 980. Are you willing to go up to that 980 now and come in at nearly $1 billion again?
You know, we are, a historic bonding bill was passed last year. We know that. What we want to be a part of is the conversations in building that bill. House Republicans, as you know, bonding is going to start in the House. We are doing that work. The capital investment committees for both House and Senate have been across the state looking at important projects. What I can tell you is even though we are not guaranteeing that there will be a bonding bill, we want to be part of crafting that language in the bill. No wasteful spending in there, staying within our means, roads, bridges, wastewater, those important infrastructure items with a statewide impact rather than just locally focused. One of the things, though, is with the potential increase, we need to be wise with that. We are not going to commit at this point whether we're going to go up. We are not going to commit that we'll even give votes for that, but we are looking forward to being part of the conversation and crafting that bill.
Where do you want to cut?
You know, I think very easily with the $1.1 billion to unaccountable nonprofits, that would be a great idea of looking at cutting and making those nonprofits accountable to the taxpayers that they've taken dollars from. They do great work, but there has to be a point of accountability. That's just a starting point of cutting.
And I'd like to add too as well, while we're talking about fiscal responsibility, ensuring that our budget is safe, Democrats are throwing out bills like sanctuary state, which is going to put more pressure on our state budgets, whether it's schools, counties, state budgets. It's those types of ideas that the Democrats are running with that we're going to hold the line on.
That bill doesn't seem to have a whole lot of support across the DFL caucus. I mean, are there other pieces of legislation you guys could potentially point to that might warrant a cut somewhere?
You know, when you look to the north of the state office building, we have a $730 million new expansion of that building. We have asked repeatedly for those bonds originally not to be let. That was not through the normal process. That is wasteful spending right there. If there is anything that we can still do with our Democrat colleagues to scale that back, we would love to do that. There was yesterday in the bill introductions, a bonding bill request to put more money into the tunnel to make it ADA compliant. I am all for making things safe. That should have been a part of the normal process of what they were currently doing. Right now, we have no tunnel. There is no ADA compliance right now to move from building to building. That is one area of absolute wasteful spending that needs to stop, scale back, and be smarter with it.
Senator and Representative, it sounds like they listened to you. I heard the MMB say spending caution. I heard the governor say we shouldn't spend any more money. Sounds like you convinced them. I don't hear them calling, the leaders calling for more spending. They listen to you, I guess.
If you remember last year as well, too, in the session priorities dinner that the chamber put on, you heard the governor say that he's a fiscal conservative and they're going to be restrained in their spending last year. What happened? They spent $17.5 billion of our surplus. They raised taxes by $10 billion. So the rhetoric does not always match the actions. And so we've got to be holding them accountable, and that's our job, and we're going to be working on that as Republicans.
Senator, you talked about a few weeks ago about eliminating the tax on Social Security, and you didn't commit to that. I heard that is a priority now. Did you change your stance on that?
On the Social Security tax?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago you didn't fully commit to eliminating the state tax.
I don't recall fully committing to that because we don't have the budget for that right now. As we talked about, Democrats in the state have completely spent the surplus and put us into a structural deficit. Last year was a year to fix that. We had the money to do it. Seniors and those that use that could have actually benefited from it last year. Now they've taken that option off the table from us because we no longer have the cash to do it.
And that's another point of broken promises by Democrats. That was something that was campaigned on. That was something that was talked about. $2,000 back to families with the surplus, ending the tax fully on Social Security. Those are proof of broken promises that were made by our Democrat colleagues.
You'll advocate for it?
You know, there is not the money. We are looking at a deficit, as Leader Johnson said. It should have been done last year. It's something we will still talk about, but again, broken promises made by the Democrat majority.
Just follow up on that, if I may, Madam Leader and Mr. Leader. You could get money for tax cuts by spending cuts. I mean, right? I mean, that's possible to do that. So why not pursue tax cuts rather than spending cuts, or a combination thereof?
You know, I would say if it is a priority by the majority, with a full Democrat majority, House, Senate, Governor, if it is a priority, they will bring it forward. We need to reduce spending. We need to provide tax cuts, potentially, to make our state more affordable for all Minnesota families. Any other questions?
Sounds like you guys have backed off of using word deficit to describe the budget currently. Structural deficit, I think, is all I've heard from you. Is that accurate, or are you still calling this a deficit?
It is absolutely a structural deficit looking forward a few years. You hear structural imbalance, but it is definitely going to be a structural deficit as we move forward with continued spending.
Looking ahead to next week, the DFL leaders just said they think there'll be bipartisan support for the SRO bill. Do you both foresee members of your caucus voting for that? Sounds like yes, but just asked, yeah.
Yeah. So we want to make sure that the stakeholders are supporting that bill. I know some of the law enforcement community is supporting part of it. There's still questions about other parts of it. So we'll wait until we get a consensus from the law enforcement community and the education community and from our members before we start looking into that as far as a bipartisan bill. But right now, we've got people working on it, and hopefully that's the way it ends up. This should be a bipartisan bill.
And in the House, Representative Jeff Whitty has been an incredible leader on this issue as a former SRO himself, a 27-year veteran of the Burnsville Police Department. He has been an incredible leader working with law enforcement. Speaker Hortman did reference a letter that came out just 2 days ago from law enforcement expressing their approval and their acceptance of where we're at on the bill. We're going to be calendaring that in rules in just a couple of minutes, and then it'll be on the floor on Monday. I do fully expect that there would be bipartisan support for this bill in the House.